I think we're on. Are we on? Are we on? I want to share this morning something that came up last night on the webinar, which was I was talking about specification. I was talking about how your costs will increase in the absence of a specification. And some of the guys that were on the call couldn't grasp this. And I've had a couple of messages following the webinar about how this is going to cost more money. So I want to take you back to a project that we did last year, which is really prevalent. Is that the right word? To this scenario, to what I'm talking about, how the lack of a specification is going to cost you more. So this particular property, we was doing a full house refurbishment on this property. And within the specification, we had full plaster, decorate, along with all the other elements of the build. But this particular element, this particular piece of work that was asked for wasn't in the initial specification, and that was to bury the central heating pipes behind the plaster. So we've come to this property in its current condition, in its current state, and we've given a price relative to what we saw and relative to the direction that we received from the client at the point of survey. There's no mention at this point. There's nothing in any spec that says that these heating pipes want to be buried. So we've gone through the project. The rads have been took off. They've been plastered behind, decorated, rads put back on. Granted, one of the rads was lifted a little bit. I forget the reason why, but it was. We lifted the radiator a bit on the wall to get it off the floor a little bit more. That was a direction that we received on site. Now, what happened with this particular client is that they came back when it came to handover at the end. And one of their snagging items was, I can see the central heating pipes. And we was like, well, yeah, and what? So, you know, they've come back and said, well, I want them buried. Now, at this point, the property has been plastered, it's been decorated, and the central heating system's been refilled, recharged and refilled. So those three things have all now happened in alignment with their initial direction and our price, which we gave over for that price for that piece of work. Now, because we'd lifted that rad anyway, the heating system had been drained down. So if at the initial directive would have been, I want the central heating pipes buried, it might have been less than 100 quid to carry out that piece of work if we'd have done it initially, whilst the central heating system was drained, whilst the property was back to brick, and before it's been plastered, before it's been decorated. That piece of work is really, really small and minuscule. That said, if that same piece of work to bury those heating pipes is then instructed and directed after it's been plastered, after it's been decorated, that piece of work now comes with significant cost relative to what it would have been if that specification had been issued accurately at the start of the project. And here's the reason why now, because we've got finished work. There's a radiator on the wall, the system's been refilled and recharged, the boiler may have even been issued a certificate, tested, etc. We've then got to, we've then plastered and decorated. So now what we've got to do is rake out a chase for the pipes to be sat back in. So we've got to empty the system again. We've got to now make a pipework adjustment. We've got to chop out the wall of finished work. We've then got to sit the pipework back behind the plaster line. We've then got to plaster up. So that's another trade coming in. We've had a heating engineer back. We've now had the plasterer back. We've now had the decorator back to put that back. And all that work all takes time as well. So not only are people revisiting finished work, that piece of work is now more expensive than it would have been initially if that instruction would have been received early on. I hope that's helped. I just wanted to share that this morning. I got in the office early, so I didn't want to try and go through that whilst I was walking. Well, that's helped. Any questions, shoot them in below. See you later.